welcome to another episode of the Humble Grape Podcast. In today's episode, we'll be asking our wine experts Carlos and David about some wine myths. The world of wine is filled with myths and misconceptions, and it makes it really hard for newcomers like myself to really separate what's fact from fiction. So shall we crack these myths?
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. This is Carlos. I'm head of wine for Humble Grape, and we've got...
Good morning, everyone. It's David, assistant wine manager. Carlos is assistant at Humble Grape.
Yeah, I think it's a very, very interesting subject that we're talking today. Every time we do tastings for customers or events, some of these questions come up when we are presenting wines, and I think I hope it will be useful for those who are starting their wine journey now, or they have been on their wine journey for a while, to try and demystify a few things about wine. As you said, wine can naturally be so complicated, and I think it's very important that we make things easier, more accessible, easier to understand, so we can hopefully get more people involved in wine, more people drinking wine and enjoying this amazing beverage.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I feel like I've also encountered a lot of situations where I never can tell the difference between fact and fiction in certain things. So it's really good that our listeners can also have this idea of like what's true, what's not. Shall we crack on then? Yeah?
Yes.
So firstly, I've got, let's start with the basics. We've got, is it true that the older the wine, the better it is? And do the best wines bear the reserve label on them?
Very interesting question. I think we've got two questions here. Let's break in two different ones. Do you want to take the first one?
Yeah, but let me start with just analyzing the word myth or misconception, because I think every myth in the world, related to wine or not, there's always a truth core. Something is true, and then during the time it evolved and people had their own story, and it kind of turned into a beast that there is a little truth somewhere, but it's not the complete truth, and people can just add the stories and it evolves, and it's sometimes it's very, very entertaining, like what it can turn into after 10, 15 years. Yeah. So I think when we go into the depth of this, it's always good to go back, like, so where is it coming from really? So when we talk about old wines or aged wines, I think the first thing that I'm picturing is back in the 1950s, 1940s, when the world was not as interconnected as today, and transport took a lot of time, and wines had to go from outside the world, and then these wines had to be able to withstand all these atrocities they went through transport, and sometimes they also were aged for such a long time in cellars before they ended up on the table. So these wines had to have something that kept them alive and kept them concentrated. And I think this is somewhere, the truth is somewhere there when we talk about long aging. And back in the time, it was very important to produce wines that can withstand all these conditions. What do you think, Carlos?
It's an interesting one, right? Because we all have, we all get the bottle of non-vintage champagne for a present, or from a friend, and we think, oh, I'm going to save this for a special occasion. And then the wine sits there for 2, 3, 4 years. And then raises the question, is an older wine better? I'm going to be quite direct and maybe controversial and say no. 95% of the wines sold in UK at the moment, they are not sold to be aged. They are sold to be drunk immediately. So that bottle of no-vintage champagne that you might have in your cupboard waiting for a special occasion for the last 2 or 3 years, maybe you should pop that wine open, because most probably it was not made to be aged. It was made to be drunk immediately.
Yes, and you just keep postponing, like let's wait for next year. Let's wait for his birthday or my dad's birthday, and like you wait so much that the wine it turns into flabby, and you pass the best time and you can have drunk it. So I think. I think many people miss the opportunity to enjoy its wine, its fullest potential, and wait too long. So, however, let me argue a little bit on that, because I think there are certain wines that are able to age, and you should wait, and then they can give you a fantastic wine experience, if you're patient enough, or if you have the money to buy a 1984 Bordeaux from Margaux. But definitely there are many wines, and I would say the majority of the wines in the industry are not made to be aged for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Yeah. The majority you can drink in between 2 and 5 years.
Yeah. And I think there's another nuance here. All the wines are a different beast. They taste different. We are all used. Let's take a red wine, for example. Generally speaking, we use to those beautiful fruity notes. Red wines a young red wine can be quite fruity, but if for those who have never had the opportunity to try an older wine, an aged wine, those wines taste different. You won't have those fruity flavors anymore. You have different flavors. The wine could smell of tobacco or chocolate or dried fruits or nuts. Could smell of wet forest floor, mushrooms, can become savory. So it is a different experience drinking an older wine. So going back to the question, is an older wine better than a young wine? It really depends on the enjoyment. Because some people don't really enjoy those savory wines. They prefer fruit wines. In that case, an older wine is not going to work for them because it has a different flavor profile. Does that make sense?
How do you define better? Just because some other people say it's better?
It's quite subjective.
It is subjective.
It's super subjective, and something that I like to say in tastings or when we're educating people on wine is the best wine in the world is the one that you like.
That
Full
is
stop.
true. Yeah.
Right? Wine is about enjoyment. If you open a bottle of wine and you're not enjoying it, it doesn't matter the price tag or how old or young the wine is. It isn't for you. It is about enjoyment.
Okay.
But there was a second part in your question, Kash. It was about
the reserve label.
Yeah, do best wines have the reserve term written on the label? This is a funny one. It plays in certain parts of the world. It can be a little bit of marketing, and I'll explain why. Normally, in the old world appellations, the term, mainly Europe, the terms reserve are protected in wine law. So the winemaking has to go through a certain process, and it normally involves aging for the producer to be able to put the term reserve on the label. Now, when it comes to the new world, non-European countries, what does reserve mean? It can mean anything.
It can be anything.
The winemaker wants it to mean. It can be a reserved barrel that the winemaker put on the side and made a special wine out of it. It could be a reserve vintage that the winemaker decided to age a little bit more and sell, or it could just be a marketing trick. So it can be a bit tricky to navigate the term reserve. So make long story short, if it comes from Europe, it most certainly is regulated by wine law and will normally mean that the wine has gone through a longer aging at the cellars of the winemakers before being sold. In the new world, it can mean anything.
So you can just slap that label on and...
In the new world, you can just slap reserve, Carlos' special reserve on the label and sell it, and because the term isn't necessarily protected by law.
Okay, interesting. Yeah.
Just another thought here that I find very interesting. As I mentioned, back in the time, let's go back to the 1800s, when most of the wines did not get consumed straight away. And people often had their own cellars and they collected their own wines and they waited, and those wines were aged for decades. And many of the regions back in Europe, because that was mostly Europe back at the time, they didn't have this indication or terminology yet. It was mainly came to be in Spain and Italy in certain regions. And that was a very different concept. I think that was one of the first, maybe not just in the history of wine, but history of communication and marketing, which is your field, Cash, that the producers started thinking with the head of the consumer, and they wanted to give them a heart that, guys, it's reserved, it's already been aged, You can drink it straight away. You do not have to worry about the cellar. You don't have to to lay it down. This is ready. We aged it for you. Put it in the oak, and then we kept it in the cellar. It's ready. It's softened. The tannins are silky. It's ready. So that was the first time, and I think that was such a fantastic step, thinking for the consumer's mind and helping them to understand, like, you can drink it. So this is how it really came to be, the terminology of reserve. And then the whole regulation evolved around it, and regions like Rioja or Chianti Reserva Classico is a very, very classic example for that. They all follow this heritage, and I think it's a very nice touch trying to make people understand what they drink and helping them.
Okay. Well, I guess that does kind of bring about how this idea of a myth came to be as well, because we've got, whether it's true, older wines are better. I mean, it was being aged from previously as well, just selling to the market so they can drink immediately. That does, I guess, kind of bring the idea of how that how that has now become a sort of myth that we debunk.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Second on our list of myths to debunk, we have, if the stopper is not made of cork, is the wine considered to be bad? Or in other words, if the cover is a screw top, is it considered to be a low quality wine?
Okay, another interesting one. I'll give my humble view, and then we see what David would like to add or say. But the thing here is, and what I'm going to say might sound a little bit controversial again, but I personally think the screw tops are better closure, is a better closure than cork, because with the screw top you never get a corked wine. You won't get a bad cork. Mm-hmm. In the UK particularly, screw tops have been associated for so long with those cheap and cheerful wines that most people look at a bottle, see a screw top and think, oh, it's going to be a cheap wine. It has nothing to do with it. You've got, for instance, there are some super premium, fantastic wines from New Zealand and Australia that will be under screw top. That because sometimes the winemakers got fed up of receiving bad corks and putting their wines under bad corks, to only have then the customer sending the wine back or complaining that the cork was bad, that these producers moved on to putting wine under screw top. So to make a long answer short, is the closure doesn't really indicate the quality of the wine, but I personally think the screw top is much safer than close the wine under a cork. What do you think, David?
Oh, the first thing I was thinking is, considered bad is such a harsh word. Bad. It can be different. It really depends on how we describe quality. Because there's one thing what you like and what's our personal taste, and this is what we are advocating for at Humble Grape, that everybody finds its wine that it likes, and to discover your palate and what you like. But when we try to analyze wines and evaluate objectively, that we need to put some kind of plan out, like how we analyze wines, and like probably one of the things we look at when we analyze quality is ageability, concentration, and like how well the wine can develop and develop complex flavors with time. Now this is I think where we touching into when we talk about closure, because there are certain wines in the world that they can age very well, and now we're going back exactly the same conversations before, aging. Yeah, somehow all these myths and misconceptions always go back to aging. Can every wine age, and how can they age? And there is one secret here for aging. You always need a little oxygen for aging, but just micro doses. Mm-hmm. And this is the secret here. Cork top can add oxygen to the wine during years or decades, but very, very small doses that helps the wine to slowly evolve and develop new flavors. And then if you wait long enough and the wine is concentrated enough and has the right acidity and tannins and so on, you can have a very beautiful, nice, complex wine with 5-10 years if the wine has these structures. But it doesn't always mean that this is what you want or what you seek for. If you want to age wine in your cellar, I would say yes, a cork top is more preferable than a screw top. But this is not always what you want, because if you want to drink a fresh, easy drinking Riesling, Australian Riesling from Eden Valley, with your scallops in a hot summer day, I would rather go for a screw top wine from this country, which is fresh, zesty, limey. I do not want oxidization. I do not want any grilled nutty notes, because you would get more like this fresh preserved flavor. However, I need to talk to against myself as well, because now that Australia, and especially New Zealand and Austria, they are the two flagship countries. They technically 90% of the wines they produce, or 95 is screw top. And there are some great results that some wines can age very well, like for example Semillon is a great variety that gained a very huge recognition in Hunter Valley in Australia, and can age very, very well on the screw top, like non-oxygen environment, which is actually a new chapter of the wine aging book, because this is something that I think we just do not know enough about that. So apparently you do not always need this micro-oxidization to achieve complexity.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because what matters actually, it's not the screw top itself, it's the lining inside of the screw top that keeps the wine away from oxygen. And we are getting quite technical here, so I'm just going to dip my toes in and out over this conversation. But there are some linings that allow a little bit of oxygen to go into the wine, even though it is a screw top, which means the wine can gain a little bit of complexity. It is something that's being trialed at the moment. But to go back to your question, and for those who are listening and always had that question, should I choose a bottle of wine that's a screw top or cork? The closure is not a sign of the quality of what's inside the bottle.
Okay, well there you go. We've got that debunked now. Third on the list I've got is actually something that I was very surprised about when I joined Humble Grape about 6 months ago. It was around summertime, when obviously all I wanted to do was drink white wine because it can be chilled. Didn't want anything warm or room temperature. And then I came across the question, can you chill red wine?
Okay, why don't you take that one, David?
You can, absolutely. Well, I also highly recommend to chill certain red wines. I often get this, I don't know how you guys have with this, but when I go to a restaurant, I often get white wines too cold, and sometimes red wines too warm.
Yes.
So, and because, there is the conception that you should have the white wine cold and the red wine warm, but actually there are certain white wines that are much better if it's not that cold, maybe a bit more lukewarm, like some chunky Chardonnays from California. And there are certain red wines that they benefit a lot if they're slightly chilled, maybe colder than a big chunky Chardonnay from California, maybe going down to 14, 13 degrees. There are certain delicate and fresh and fruity red wines, low alcohol, low tannins. They're just so beautiful drinking in a summer evening with your charcuterie.
Yes.
This is what you want, like a Frappato from Sicily, or a Nero di Vola even. So I think there are a lot of potential in chilling red wines, and this is something that we should absolutely try, and I highly recommend everybody. If you never tried a chilled red wine, start trying it and tasting it. There are a few things to look out. Try to go for red wines which have low tannins. We can talk about a little bit tannins, but this is that kind of chewy mouth feeling on your gums when you feel like your upper lip is stuck to your teeth. Or try to go for lower alcohol. These red wines are fantastic being chilled.
Absolutely. David, you touched on a few good examples. A Frappato, Nero d'Avola, a Beaujolais, it's a good example of chilling wine as well. An Austrian Zweigelt.
Absolutely.
And then I think there's a question that's hanging in the air here. How long do you chill a bottle of red wine for?
Exactly.
Before you serve, if you want to drink a chilled red wine. Rule of thumb here for those who want to try a chilled bottle of chilled red, bring that bottle from the shop when you get home, put in the fridge for 30 minutes, 35 minutes, and then take it out. You'll be at a perfect temperature, and you will feel that all those lovely, fruity, crunchy notes from the wine, they become even more evident because the wine is chilled. But on the flip side, as I've said, be careful not to chill wines that are very alcoholic or wines that are very tonic. A chilled tonic red wine, you will feel almost like as if you were licking a shoe brush. So choose wines that are lighter and fruitier, and the enjoyment will become even greater when you chill a little bit.
Okay, and on that topic, what would you say is the ideal temperature for when you are chilling a light red wine?
It's always a funny question, and when we are WSET, we'll prescribe exact temperatures. 13 degrees, 14 degrees, 15 degrees. But let's be honest, we're not at home. We're not going to stick a thermometer into the wine to see whether it's chilled or not. As long as when you touch the bottle, if it is cold to the touch, then probably is at the right temperature for you to drink the red wine.
Okay.
If it feels cool at the touch, if it feels well cold, that your fingers start getting numb. That's probably a little bit too much. We are not making ice cream here. We're trying to drink chilled wine. So as long as it's cool to the touch, will probably be at the right temperature. That's what I said. In the fridge that we've got at home, if you put the wine in there for 30 minutes, it will be at a nice temperature for it to drink.
You could say cellar cold. Yes, like 13, 14 degrees. But you're never gonna carry
a thermometer
in your pocket. So yeah.
Okay, I mean, I hope some of our listeners actually try this because, I mean, I did try this at a restaurant about a few months ago during summer, and can I just say it is probably my favorite way of drinking red wine now.
It is a revelation, isn't it?
It really
when
is.
You try a nice, well-chilled bottle of red wine, it's so fresh, it is a revelation.
Yeah. On the topic of red wine, actually, is it true that you can only have red wine with meat and white wine with fish? Can you switch that around?
I think the misconception is you can only have red wine with red meat. You can only have white wine with fish or white meat, maybe poultry.
It is a valid question because this is probably going to show my age compared to you two, but we have that classic perception. You have your white wine with your fish, and then followed by your red wine with your meat. To go straight to the question, and also to be a bit controversial here, can you have red wine with fish? Yes, you can. And I can almost hear the question in the air, what wine should I drink with fish? That is very easy to answer. If you can chill the red wine, you can drink with fish. If you treat the red wine like a white wine, you can put in the fridge and chill, going back to our previous question, then you can pair that with fish. If the wine is light, fresh, has a nice acidity to it, not a lot of tannins, not very alcoholic, and you can chill, you can eat that with fish. Can you drink white wine with red meat?
You can. You certainly can. The only question is it worth it?
Yeah.
I represent a bit even more old school point of view here. I think in a nutshell, I would say red wines work better with red, big, heavy, chunky meat, and white wine because it's more delicate, work better with delicate food. Therefore, white meat like fish and chicken. But there are some exceptions, and this is, I think, goes down to the knowledge of the chef in the kitchen and the chef in the winery, the winemaker, how they influence the wine and how they influence the food. Because you can make a heavy, full-bodied, rich wine even from grape varieties, which are 9 times out of 10 usually produce a lighter style or more delicate style, and you can also make a heart dish from something like a chicken if you add the certain ingredients. So I think you can experiment a lot around. I think in general this is a misconception that probably I'm still in that and I still see it the same way, but there are it's always worth experimenting because sometimes experiments help us to discover new things and we can find some fantastic combinations that we didn't discover before. So in a nutshell, I would say this is something that it's based on quite a strong ground.
I'm going to be the controversial one in this conversation and say maybe those want to try at home. A lighter cut of steak, like a filet mignon, with a nice buttery Chardonnay. If you squeeze a few drops of lemon on top of the steak, try with a nice glass of Chardonnay and see what you think. Because, again, this is quite controversial. When it comes to food and wine pairing, it is a very long subject. I'm just going to dip my toes in and out again of this. When it comes to food and wine pairing, I've been around the block a while, and I've never seen anyone being struck by lightning or bursting into flames because they chose the wrong glass of wine to drink with the wrong dish. It happens very often. And if that's the case, you eat a dish, drink a sip of water, and enjoy your wine. It's all about experimenting. It's all about the adventure of trying something new and experimenting with something new.
Yeah, I mean, only if you experiment will you know what you like. And after all, you just drink what you like, eat what you like with what you drink,
Absolutely.
Okay, well...
If I could just add one more thing to this topic. Food pairing is a huge topic, and we can easily get lost in that. But since we're talking about misconceptions and myths, the classic myths like cheese and red wine. This is like people always think that cheese and red wine. Mm-hmm. Based on my experience and I do taste a lot of food with a lot of different wines. To me, cheese always works better with white wine because cheese is technically protein and fat, and it's matured. And white wine always has this nice acidity, freshness, and delicate, and lets the cheese to shine. And I think it can give you a very, very nice combination compared to red wines, in my experiences.
I'm only going to say this. Blue cheese and port, and then move swiftly on.
Well, we will be trying I certainly know I will be trying a lot of different things tonight. On the topic of just when you pair your wines with certain foods, obviously food does bring out the flavor of the food that you choose does bring out the flavor of the wine, but again, that's a whole different topic on its own, and in the end it is just what you enjoy and what you want to, I guess, go ahead with,
Absolutely.
Yeah. Another myth that I actually have questioned myself a few times is it true that if you keep a spoon in your sparkling wine, it keeps the bubbles overnight? Because I have tested this.
Never heard of this.
I have tested this, and let me just say, it did work with fizzy drinks, but for some reason it didn't work with sparkling wine. And I'm just wondering, is this a myth or is this true?
You mean putting a teaspoon in the bottle, hanging on top of the bottle,
yes,
to try and keep the sparkling wine fresh? What?
Is there some reaction between metal and the carbon dioxide? What is it like?
I don't know. I've seen this before, and I remember. I was at I'm not going to say the name of the bar. I was at a bar in East London waiting for my partner, and I ordered a glass of sparkling wine. And to my horror, when the bartender opened the fridge to take the bottle, lo and behold, there comes the bottle with a teaspoon in it. And it was to my horror. I was like, what is going on here? It's quite common, I've seen friends doing that at home. Does that work? Well, I think we have to very quickly brush over on how sparkling wine is made for us to understand whether that works or not. So, a sparkling wine is normally made by putting the fruit juice, the content, through two different fermentations. In the first fermentation, you get a still white wine, and then in the second fermentation, that still white wine is put in a container by the producer. The producer will add a little bit of grape sugar or sugar, yeast, and close the container. So when the second fermentation happens, the yeast will also produce CO2. But because the container is under pressure, the CO2 doesn't have anywhere to go. It remains dissolved in wine. And that's what makes bubbles in the wine. If that container where the second fermentation took place, it's a stainless steel tank, that's called the Charmat method or Prosecco method. That's how Prosecco is made. If that container is the bottle that the wine is going to be sold in, that's the traditional method or the champagne method. But in both, the liquid was kept under pressure to keep the CO2 dissolved. So it creates bubbles. Now, once you remove the cork, that pressure that keeps the CO2 dissolved is no longer there. The container is open. So the CO2 will start coming out of the wine. Now, for those who have done that before, if you put a teaspoon through the top of the bottle, you will not restore the pressure. It will not keep the wine in the bottle under pressure. So the CO2 will still come out of the bottle. And then there's the question, what is the best solution? To always have a bubbly fizzy glass of sparkling wine every time you go back to the bottle. There are two ways of keep your wine always bubbly when you're drinking. First, you drink the whole bottle. Or you use a champagne closure. That's quite easy to buy on Amazon, will be 4 or 5 quid. That will restore the pressure in the bottle, which keeps the CO2 dissolved in the wine and keep the bubbles fresh. It also helps if you keep your wine cool, because the cooler the wine, the slower the ratio that the CO2 will come out of the wine. That's why, for instance, if you try to open a bottle of Prosecco that's at room temperature, you get a lovely shower of Prosecco on your face. Because the temperature is higher, the CO2 becomes more active and comes out of the solution more quickly. I know it was a little bit technical, but what do you think, David?
This is the first time I heard about this.
Really?
Spoon in sparkling wine or fizzy drinks. I'm trying to deep into all my natural science knowledge. I actually went to uni studying environment engineering. If I studied anything about that, and sorry for the listeners who are very well educated in that, and I do not know, but I just do not know any kind of what kind of reaction can be between carbon dioxide in wine and the metal, how it bonds it and it doesn't let it to go away. I don't know, because Carlos touching the pressure, it's all about the pressure and keeping everything under pressure. This is what we know, this is the industry, this is how the industry tackles with the situation, not to let sparkling wines go flat quickly. They're using the caps, they're using the stoppers. It sounds to me like an urban legend. To be honest, this is it sounds. I don't think this comes from the wine industry. I think it comes from somebody somehow at home that maybe also drank a little bit of the wine as well before, and they tried it. Sorry for that. Tried it, and then I don't know, woke up and it was still sparkling. Maybe just the wine was very good and it was still sparkling, and then they credited to the teaspoon that it's still sparkling. Sorry, I'm just a bit skeptical.
Yeah, me too. It's a widely believed myth. I've seen a few times at friends' homes and even at tastings. People ask, does it work? It doesn't, and I've tried Googling it to see where it came from, but I can't find where this myth comes from. But yeah, in my humble opinion, no, it doesn't work.
Yeah, it is a very interesting myth when surely we don't have anything previously to back that up as to where or how it came about to be. On that note, I do need to go remove the spoon that's in my Prosecco in my fridge at home tonight.
I cannot believe that, Kash. I cannot believe that.
All right, well, moving on then. Another myth that I've got that I wanted to discuss with you both today was, are blended wines inferior to single varietal wines?
Oh,
okay, David.
A bit of a long one, I think.
Based on the look on your face, I think you're keen to get on this one.
This is just so rude. But I understand why the myth exists. I think people think that if you blend wine, you blend it in order to make up the quality because you lose it somewhere else. Maybe one of the grapes. Maybe if there's 3 grapes in the blender, maybe 1 or 2 were not that good, and you use a third one to make it up. So maybe this is what's behind it. That's what people think. Maybe. However, just so you know, that there are many very, very prestigious, famous wine regions in the world, such as Bordeaux, that they are famed for that blending art. This is technically called an art, and they use different grape varieties in order to create complex flavor profile of wine. So, short answer, no, absolutely no, this is not true. You can get fantastic quality from blended wines, and you can get mediocre quality from single varietal. I don't think there is a connection in that necessarily. Mm-hmm. That can be true, that there are some winemakers in the world. It's probably more like big production. They use different grape varieties in order to create a consistent quality that not necessarily the aim is not necessarily the quality but more like the quantity, and they plant certain grape varieties that they yield very well but the concentration is not that, and then they use different grapes just to build it and to have the acquired quantity from the market. But this is just to announce it that blended wines are inferior to single ones. This is not true.
Yeah, I agree. I'm gonna have my word in on this one, and just to provoke. Some of the most expensive wines in the world are blended wines. Think Bordeaux, the classified growths that sells for thousands of pounds a bottle. On the other hand, some of the most expensive wines in the world, think Burgundy, are varietal wines. They're made from one grape variety, Pinot Noir. So whether the wine is blended or not, it's not a sign of quality. In certain places, blending is a tradition. It's to create a style. Think Bordeaux, or think Champagne. Champagnes can be blended wines of Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, Meunier. So no, yeah, I don't think that whether the wine is blended or single varietal, it's actually makes one better than the other. No, there's a lot more that goes into play in the bottle that will influence the quality of the wine.
Okay. Well, I mean, I guess like David said, it is sort of an art having the blended grapes in one, just a single bottle. Yeah. Okay. Well, I know we touched on this a little bit earlier when we were talking about stoppers for our bottles, where, you know, with a cork stopper you have that minor dosages of oxygen that kind of goes through. On that sort of topic as well, I guess, the myth that I would want to discuss now is, do we need to decant wine? But before we go into that, would you be able to first just clarify what the process of decantation is, just for any newcomers just learning about wine?
Okay.
Carlos, please.
Decanting wine. So, that literally means removing wine from its original packaging, aka bottle, and put it into a glass container, right? It could be an expensive fancy crystal decanter, it could be a glass jug. You're literally just removing the wine from the packaging. That's what decanting is. The most important, the biggest reason for decanting a wine, and we mostly think about decanting red wines here, is to remove the wine from sediment. As the wine stays in bottle for a while, and David brilliantly talked about aging and touched on the subject before. As the wine ages, all sorts of little miracles happen in the wine. All those chemical compounds binding with each other and creating other chemical compounds and making the wine smell different. But also, certain things fall out of solution. In red wines, for instance, you notice that as the red wine ages, it loses color, and you also feel when you drink it that it loses tannins. So that creates sediment on the bottom of the bottle. Sediments are fine. You can drink them. You can eat them. For those who love cooking, a little bit of sediment left with wine makes a fantastic wine reduction. It can be drunk, it can be eaten, but it just doesn't have a nice texture, a nice sensation on the mouth. So we decant wines to remove the wine from those sediments. That is the most important reason. Now, A lot of wines can benefit from decanting, because when you decant, you remove the wine from the bottle, you put in the decanter, you're also exposing the wine into oxygen, right? There's a lot of, the whole entire thing is coming in contact with oxygen because you're removing from the bottle. That is, you are slightly accelerating the aging process of the wine. You're changing slightly the flavor of the wine. So if you have one of those big Barossa Valley Shirazes that almost explode with blackberries and blueberries out of the glass, and you want to tone down the wine a little, you can decant it. It will tone down the wine a little bit. Another reason to decant wine, and this is also going to be a little bit controversial, you can decant white wines.
Okay.
Yes, if you have a dinner party or you're having the dinner and all of a sudden you realize, I chilled this wine too much. It's too cold. I can't smell, I can't taste the wine. The best way to bring the wine back to room temperature is to decant it.
Okay, interesting. Well, that is something I haven't tried before, so it's good to know, and for our listeners as well, decanting white wine is a possibility. Lastly, a question that gets asked quite a lot, and I bet you guys have encountered it many a times, is, are expensive wines the best?
Oh, that's quite a polemic subject. Pricing. What influences the price of wine? That could be a podcast on its own. So I'm going to give you a very short answer for this, and then let's see if David agrees with me. Are expensive wines the best? No. Not always.
Okay, David?
Agree. What does it mean best? It is also very subjective. Best for you. I always highly encourage people not to be influenced too much about prices and branding, to try to understand wine, and I think it's good to learn about wine without putting too much pressure on consumers, but I think it's really worth it to become a conscious consumer, and because then you understand your own taste and what you like, and then you can go for the wines that you, with an educated choice, like what could potentially please your palate and your preferences. You don't necessarily have to follow the pricing. Prices are something that set up mainly by market demand and supplier chain factors. So yes, if there is a huge demand, a certain brand, a certain winery, and then there is also only a few made, the price is gonna go up. That's true. That is true. But it doesn't mean that you're gonna like that wine. And it would be such a shame you spend £2,000 on a bottle of wine that in the end you're just gonna put the hide the pain Herald face and say everybody, it was really nice, yeah. I don't think it's worth it. I think what's worth it is experimenting, getting into wine, learning about the producers. Why does it taste like this? Why does it taste like passion fruit or blackcurrant? What's behind this? I think it's so exciting to learn and understand in the end, like, so that's why I like this Cabernet Sauvignon, because I like blackcurrant, because I like toast. Where does the toast come from? All these things, and I think it can give you a cathartic experience, almost like art. When you when you listen to music or when you watch a movie, a very complex movie, and the twist and everything, and in the end everything makes sense. That's a cathartic experience, and you can get it in wine as well. But I think, and that's why I always encourage people who are getting into wine, do not feel pressured by the whole wine world, because there's a lot to learn. That's true, but it's worth learning about wine, because you're gonna appreciate it more, and you can reach the cathartic experience, which is absolutely worth it.
Okay, and I'm again going to be the controversial one on this one. I've tried pricey bottles of wines that were not so pricey. Sometimes I had a better enjoyment with the wines where they were cheaper than the more expensive, and vice versa. I agree, we all need to learn about wine, but we are recording this podcast on a Thursday morning. So imagine, tonight one of our listeners has to go into a wine shop to choose a bottle of wine, or a Humble Grape wine shop, to take to a dinner party. And you're listening to this and thinking, wow, should I go through how much should I read or study about wine in order to choose a bottle? How do I choose a bottle? Because I think the myth here that expensive wines are better come from consumers looking and thinking, how do I choose a wine? Maybe I'll choose the more expensive one because it's better. Or some people choose it based on branding. You know, they look, the label is striking, the shape of the bottle is striking. I'm going to get that one. How do I choose a bottle of wine? Well, as you can probably tell, our listeners, we wine lovers, professionals, we love talking about wine. We can talk about wine until the cows come home. So if you go into a shop, if you go into one of our Humble Grape shops, and you want to choose a bottle of wine for dinner tonight, you don't want to be guided by price. You don't want to be guided by the label. The best way here is to talk to us, right? People feel quite intimidated to talk about wine when they look at a wine list, when they're in a wine shop, because perhaps they don't want to show how little or how much they know about wine. That doesn't matter, because we love talking about wine. If you come in and ask a question, believe me, if we have 45 minutes to stand there with you and talk about wine with you and help you choose a bottle of wine, we will do so. Specifically to Humble Grape, the word humble is written above the front door, so you can feel comfortable to walk in and ask the questions, you know. And as David was saying, help you with the journey, help you learn about a wine style, help you learn about a wine producer, and help you identify what you like about the wine. Like David said, a Cabernet Sauvignon, I like blackcurrant, blackberries and toast. Okay, fantastic. But Cabernet Sauvignon, certain Cabernet Sauvignons will fit that. So how about you try that? Being guided by price or being guided by branding, you need to be careful, because there's some marketing that goes behind it, and you won't always be enjoyable. So not necessarily paying a fortune for the wine will guarantee that you will enjoy what's in the bottle.
Well, that's great to know that I do not need to hurt my bank account to enjoy a good glass of wine. Well, yes, I do really, like the fact that over here, it's really all about removing the snobbery around wine. You don't need to know. We have people here that can really talk you through it all, and like you said, talk for 45 minutes straight even, because you guys do love to talk about wine.
Yes, we do.
Speaking of which, that is everything that I've got for today, but I feel like there are going to be a few more myths that we might discuss coming up very soon, so yeah.
Yes, absolutely. There are a few more myths that we come across, David, when we're talking to customers and doing tastings, and I think I can sense another episode on wine myths coming up.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much, David and Carlos. It was lovely to have this chat. Yeah.
It's a pleasure.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, David, and thank you, guys, who listen to our podcast. And just to close, of course, because there needs to be a little plug there. If you go on our website and you want to order wine with us, if you use the code HGPodcast10, you get 10% discount on your next wine order. Thank you very much, and then until the next episode.